In the mist-shrouded forests, beneath the canopy of ancient evergreens, along the shores of glacial lakes, and across the jagged mountain ranges of the American West Coast, folklore doesn't simply linger like morning fog, it flourishes. These stories don't just haunt old books or folklore anthologies. They live, breathe, and evolve with every retelling. From rural Oregon towns to coastal California cliffs, legends flow like underground rivers, hidden beneath the surface until they emerge. Sometimes as whispers around a campfire, sometimes as viral posts online, and sometimes as the inexplicable chill that dances down your spine in the dark. While Bigfoot gets all the tourist signs and Hollywood horror continues to churn out glossy ghosts and jump scares, the deeper, lesser-known tales are where the real character of West Coast folklore lies. Odd, eerie, often funny, and always somehow tethered to the land itself. These spooky stories stretch far beyond the familiar figures like Sasquatch or the haunted mansions of Los Angeles. They are rooted in places you can visit on a map, landscapes that hum with the weight of memory and mystery. They are born from fog banks rolling off the Pacific, from the deep silence of redwood groves, from the volcanic soil beneath your feet. These aren't just stories for entertainment. They're cultural breadcrumbs, scattered across generations and stitched into the experience of living in the West. Whether it's a high schooler daring friends to drive up Gravity Hill after midnight, or an old-timer recounting tales of spectral lights dancing above Mount Shasta, these narratives carry the voice of the region's past and present alike. And as the decades roll on, from the days of hand-cranked lanterns to TikTok and Reddit threads, West Coast legends have only grown stranger, funnier, and somehow more believable. To understand the roots of this folklore, you have to go back to a time when the West was still being claimed, mapped, and settled by newcomers who often didn't understand the land they were entering. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, as railroads carved their black iron paths through the vast wilderness of Oregon and Washington, myths collided like tectonic plates. Indigenous traditions, which had existed for thousands of years, met head-on with settler fears, religious beliefs, and tall tales imported from the East Coast and Europe. The result was a fusion of storytelling that still informs many West Coast legends today. Part cautionary tale, part cultural mashup, and almost always flavored with a touch of the surreal. One such story comes from the Salish people of what is now Washington State. In their telling, two powerful mountain spirits engaged in a battle of fire and fury, hurling flaming stones and boulders at one another in a violent clash that shook the earth. Today, we call those mountains Mount St. Helens and Mount Adams. And scientists now know they have indeed erupted at the same time in the distant past. But long before volcanology had the instruments to measure seismic activity or trace ash layers in ancient soil, the Salish had already explained it in mythic terms that were, in a strange way, scientifically accurate. A former Civil War soldier who later turned to documenting regional folklore recorded the story in the 1870s. More than 100 years later, modern geologists verified what the legend had preserved. It's a moment where the spiritual met the scientific in eerie synchronicity, a reminder that folklore often holds deeper truths, wrapped in metaphor and memory. Not far from those volcanic giants, the hills of Tillamook, Oregon, carried another tale, one with less fire and more treasure. For generations, whispers circulated about a stash of hidden gold buried somewhere in the wooded hills above town. As is tradition in American folklore, the treasure was said to be cursed, guarded by supernatural forces, and fated to bring doom to those who searched for it. Predictably, people tried anyway. Some explorers vanished in the woods, some reportedly went mad, and some simply gave up. Maps appeared and disappeared. Clues were passed around like secrets in a poker game, but no one ever found the gold. Over time, the tale shifted from credible quest to fireside fable, but even today, now and then, someone shows up with a metal detector and a glint of hope in their eyes. Whether they're chasing riches or just a good ghost story, it doesn't really matter. The legend lives on either way. As the 20th century rolled along and the West Coast transformed from frontier outpost to cultural mecca, its strangeness didn't fade with modernization. It simply evolved. In fact, one could argue that the weirdness only grew stronger, more specific, and far more bizarre. The natural beauty of the region, its foggy coastlines, thick forests, volcanic mountains, and remote towns proved to be a perfect breeding ground for the kind of stories that live somewhere between local history and whispered folklore. In the small community of Olalla, Washington, nestled in the misty woods near Puget Sound, a chilling chapter began in the early 1900s with the notorious case of Linda Hazard. Known colloquially as the starvation doctor, Hazard operated a so-called health retreat, where she claimed that fasting could cure any and all ailments. But her version of fasting was extreme. Patients, often wealthy or from out of state, were subjected to brutal starvation regimens, with nothing more than small servings of tomato broth and occasional orange juice. Over time, their health would decline rapidly, unsurprisingly, and many did not survive the treatment. Hazard was eventually convicted of manslaughter in 1912, but by then, the damage was done. While her crimes are well documented in legal records, her presence seems to linger. Tales of ghostly activity around the old clinic have circulated for decades. Locals report feeling watched, hearing phantom footsteps, and seeing shadowy figures where her patients once wasted away. Although she was a real person, the stories surrounding her and her sinister retreat have taken on an almost mythic quality, blurring the line between fact and urban legend. To this day, Linda Hazard is a name that makes people in Kitsap County shiver. Heading down the Pacific coast into northern Oregon, things don't get any less strange. Along the iconic stretch of Highway 101 near the seaside town of Cannon Beach, a local legend has lingered for generations. The tale of the Bandage Man. This spectral figure is said to be the ghost of a logger who met a gruesome end in a sawmill accident, or in some tellings, during a landslide. He now roams the coastal highway, wrapped entirely in blood-soaked bandages, emitting a stench of decay. But what makes the Bandage Man particularly unsettling isn't just his appearance, it's his behavior. He doesn't merely haunt, he actively harasses. He's said to leap into the beds of pickup trucks or suddenly appear in the backseat of parked cars where teens might be distracted. In some accounts, he leaves behind pieces of bloodied bandage. The sightings are fleeting, often just a glimpse in the fog or a quick reflection in a side mirror, but they're enough to keep the legend alive. The Bandage Man has taken on an almost folkloric status as Oregon's own backseat phantom, a kind of coastal Slender Man with more grime and a more specific zip code. Locals may joke about him, but few would want to test their luck alone on that highway at night. Further south, Central California brought its own contribution to the pantheon of weird with one of the strangest and most recent additions to cryptid culture, the Fresno Nightcrawler. First appearing in grainy surveillance footage during the 2000s, the Nightcrawler doesn't resemble traditional monsters or animals. In fact, it barely resembles anything at all. Standing at roughly 3 to 4 feet tall, with no arms, no torso to speak of, and impossibly long legs, it appears to be all lower body. These odd figures have been recorded gliding, almost floating, across yards and driveways in the dead of night, always in silence, always with an eerie, puppet-like rhythm. The footage quickly gained traction online, spawning debates, fan art, and theories ranging from alien visitors to rogue CGI. But for many who've seen the videos, hoax or not, the Nightcrawlers struck a nerve. There's something deeply unsettling about how confidently they stride through suburbia, completely indifferent to cameras or human presence. Unlike other cryptids that roar or chase or hide, these beings simply exist, and that somehow is more disturbing. Meanwhile, back up north, the majestic and mysterious Mount Shasta looms large, not just on the landscape, but in the realm of supernatural speculation. This volcanic peak in Northern California has long been a hotspot for spiritual seekers, conspiracy theorists, and lovers of the uncanny. For over a century, it's been at the center of elaborate legends involving the Lemurians, a supposed ancient race of hyper-intelligent beings who escaped the sunken continent of Lemuria and now live deep beneath the mountain. Some believe these beings possess advanced technology, can communicate telepathically, and guard interdimensional portals located in the mountain's heart. Over the years, numerous hikers and campers have reported seeing glowing orbs, strange geometric patterns in the sky, or even cloaked figures vanishing into thin air. There are also stories of people encountering strangers with oddly formal speech and old-fashioned clothing who disappear when questioned. Mount Shasta has become a kind of West Coast Roswell crossed with a New Age cathedral, a place that draws alien believers, spiritualists, and curious skeptics alike. Whether it's a nexus of cosmic energy or just an incredibly atmospheric mountain, Shasta never fails to leave an impression. The mountain doesn't give explanations. It just watches, listens, and occasionally whispers something back, just enough to keep the stories going. Equally strange, if not stranger, the longer you think about it, are the tales surrounding Gravity Hill near Prosser, Washington. This unassuming stretch of road has developed a reputation far beyond its quiet surroundings. According to legend and a number of slightly spooked drivers, if you put your car in neutral at just the right spot on the hill, it will begin to roll uphill, defying everything you know about gravity. No motor, no push, no tricks, just a slow, steady crawl back up the incline as if an invisible hand is tugging it along. For teenagers in the area, it's become something of a rite of passage, especially under the cover of night. Groups will pile into cars late on weekend evenings, drive out to the hill with flashlights, energy drinks, and just enough courage, kill the engine, and wait. Some say they feel a strange pressure in the car, a shift in the air. Others swear they've heard whispers or seen shapes in the roadside brush. Of course, rational explanations include clever optical illusions caused by the surrounding landscape or subtle magnetic anomalies in the region's rock formations. But despite all that, one thing is clear. It's undeniably creepier when the sun goes down, and the science doesn't fully kill the mystery. Washington State, a place already overflowing with natural beauty and brooding weather, is something of a gold mine when it comes to local oddities and eerie folklore. The state doesn't just flirt with weird, it embraces it, collecting stories like moss gathers on cedar trees. Pike Place Market, known for its fish-tossing vendors and postcard-perfect views of Elliott Bay, is also home to a lesser-known spectral resident, the ghost of Chief Seattle's daughter. Visitors and workers alike have reported cold spots, phantom footsteps, and fleeting glimpses of a woman in traditional dress who appears and vanishes without a sound. Head north to Bellingham, and you might hear about the boom horse, a mysterious, disembodied neigh said to echo through the fog near old logging roads. No horse in sight, just the sound, eerie and inexplicable, bouncing through the trees. And then there's the legendary tree octopus, a creature that began as an internet hoax but quickly rooted itself into Pacific Northwest folklore like it belonged there all along. Said to live in the damp, mossy rainforests of the Olympic Peninsula, the tree octopus supposedly slinks from branch to branch, snatching chickens, avoiding cameras, and evading skeptics with the sly grace of a born cryptid. Despite its origins as satire, the tree octopus has become an oddball cultural mascot, referenced in classrooms, memes, and amateur cryptozoology blogs. Somehow, the fact that it was made up makes it even more beloved. In the Northwest, where myth and mystery go hand in hand, a hoax can evolve into legend faster than you can say Photoshop. Then there's the matter of the so-called cat cult of Mount Hood National Forest, a tale that's part internet lore, part forest whisper, and entirely unsettling. Rumors suggest that deep within the dense Oregon woods, there's a reclusive group devoted to worshiping or communing with cats, possibly both literal and symbolic. Eyewitnesses, or people who claim to be, describe robed figures moving silently between trees, glowing eyes watching from the underbrush, and the distant cries of dozens, sometimes hundreds, of cats echoing in unison. The rituals are unknown, the origin unclear, and the evidence basically non-existent, yet the legend persists. It's the kind of story that sounds like a joke until you're hiking solo and here's something that makes you pause and think, just in case. In Tacoma, the weird turns tragic with the story of the haunted tuberculosis hospital, formerly a native boarding school, where grief and ghost stories seem permanently etched into the walls. Visitors speak of cold drafts in closed rooms, eerie children's laughter in empty hallways, and shadowy figures glimpsed just as you round a corner. Paranormal investigators have documented flickering equipment, unexplainable noises, and sudden emotional drops. Local teens dare each other to sneak inside after dark, and more than a few claim to have seen something they won't talk about again. For ghost hunters and armchair skeptics alike, the building stands as one of the most compelling haunted locations in the region. Eastern Washington doesn't get left out either. Lake Wenatchee, a stunning alpine lake framed by evergreens and mist, plays host to the tale of the Prop Man. Supposedly, this spectral figure appears on foggy evenings near the docks, his face obscured by a fisherman's cap, carrying a broken propeller blade. He's linked in stories to a series of boating accidents that defy logical explanation, and some believe he was a victim of one himself, a man who drowned in a storm, now cursed to haunt others from the shoreline. The story is vague, shape-shifting with every telling, but that's what makes it work. Over on Lake Crescent in the Olympic National Park, another famous spirit holds court. The Lady of the Lake story begins in the 1940s when a woman named Hallie Illingworth vanished from a nearby lodge. Her body turned up 3 years later, preserved eerily well in the lake's cold, mineral-rich waters. The tale has since morphed into ghost story territory, with reports of a pale woman standing by the water's edge, vanishing when approached, or drifting silently beneath the surface. It's one of those stories that, while based on fact, has taken on mythic proportions in the foggy landscape that surrounds it. And of course, you can't talk Pacific Northwest legends without a nod to the lesser-known aquatic monsters. Wally, said to inhabit Wallowa Lake, is a classic example, a regional cryptid described variously as a serpent, a sturgeon, or some prehistoric holdover from before the last ice age. Meanwhile, Ogopogo, more famously tied to Lake Okanagan in Canada, occasionally gets sightings in Lake Chelan, because if you're a mythical lake monster, you deserve a change of scenery now and then. Across college campuses and old buildings, the stories don't stop. Kamola Hall at Central Washington University is supposedly haunted by a ghost named Lola. Descriptions vary. Some say she's benevolent, others claim she's mischievous, but nearly everyone agrees there's something uncanny about the dorm's creaky halls and sudden temperature drops. It's become a badge of honor among students to live there, to feel a door close on its own, and pretend you're not the slightest bit rattled. When you zoom out, the folklore of the Pacific Northwest and the broader West Coast feels like a living, breathing thing. These aren't just stories people tell at parties or around fire pits. They're experiences, beliefs, inside jokes with nature itself. They're held aloft by fog, reinforced by silence, and passed down not because they're proven, but because they resonate. The West Coast doesn't simply enjoy a good, scary story. It absorbs it, shaping it to fit the land and mood. And the best part? No one really wants to know the full truth. Not exactly. Because half of the magic is not knowing. Walking into the woods, turning onto a silent road, stepping into a cold hallway, and wondering if this will be the moment when legend becomes real.
Come along, let's sing, where the joy will bring. Tune into the beat, feel the magic, it's true. Channel 199 on X, we're here just for you, for you.